Look who's going live early. Hi, everybody. I just figured I have a couple of minutes, so I'll just wait for you guys to show up. And let's say an early hello. Yeah. And let me just make sure that it's streaming to YouTube. There it is. I see it coming on with a little delay going on. So please let me know if the audio is okay. It looks like the video is fine. I'm always reluctant to turn my audio on my end in case we get that feedback loop. There's Castine. Good old Castine's here. Yahoo. Hi, oops. Castine. There we go. Sounding good? Thank you, sound technician person. Thank you for informing me that I'm not talking to nobody and I am sounding okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've got to do this right. Glad I started early because I got to make sure I do this properly. So this is in Ecamm, and I want to share my screen. Blah blah blah. How do I do that again? It's been a while since I've used this. Share screen. Okay, so if I do this, eventually you'll be seeing my screen there. And if I do this and make this big, so let's see if this is going to work. Of course, it'll cover my ability to see YouTube, so that's not good. But let me just see if that worked. I'll just check real quick. I see the screen share happening. Yes. Stealth Parrot. Very nice to see you there, Stephen. Thanks for coming to the show. I guess it was in London, Ontario, wasn't it, that you were at my show recently? And of course, Castine was at, were you at a couple of shows in Germany? 1, 2? I can't remember. Yeah, I think you were at, oh yeah, you came to the guitar festival in Gingen, right? And weren't you at one other show as well? Just remind me. Hello, Detlef. Nice to see you there. Detlef Hans Servi. Herzlich willkommen, wenn du bist aus Deutschland. Auch Kerstin, ja. Ihr seid sehr, sehr nett hier zu sein. It was London at the Aeolian. Yes, that's what I thought. That's what I remembered. So my memory's pretty good about most things. My late brother's old joke was that his memory was really good. It was just short. I always liked that. My memory's pretty good, but it's also long. So as you know, I don't know why I remember so much, but I just remember so much. It's kind of crazy. I saw a little bit of a documentary the other day. Am I still on screen share? I guess I am. That's funny. Okay, hold on. I'll take it off screen share. Good thing we're not officially started yet. Okay, so the source can be the camera. There we go. We're back to normal. Okay. Yeah, I saw the beginning of a documentary the other day about this young woman who seems to be able to remember every single moment of her life. And she also remembers everything she reads about, or finds out about historically. So the interviewer was asking about, which celebrity had a significant thing happen to them on whatever, September 22nd, 1985 or whatever. And she'd say, oh yeah, that's the day that, the person who played Harry on Detective Schlumpf died in a toothpaste accident. She would know all the details, and it was ridiculous. Yeah, so Kerstin, you came to Gingen an Wermelskirchen. Great. Let's see what else people are saying here. Detlef says, ja, wir waren bei dir im Konzert in Reda-Wiedenburg mit Jule. I remember that show very well. You must remember, I'm sorry, I'm speaking in English, but so everybody can understand. Detlef, you must remember that Jule came out and did a couple of songs at the beginning of that show. And there was a very grumpy man in the front row, or one of the front rows. And he started yelling at her or something. Right, because I think she had some feedback problem. And we did a sound check, and everything was fine in sound check. And then she went to start her set, and then the machines howled a little bit. And I was backstage, so I didn't really know what happened. I just heard the noise, and then I heard Yuta sort of explaining, "Hey, sorry, this happens sometimes, blah blah blah." But then when I came out, she was pretty PTSD. She was like, "Ooh," she was kind of freaked out, and she had this look on her face. And at first, I thought she was angry with me for some reason, and I couldn't figure out why. I thought, did I not count the right number of songs before I came out? Because she did 2 songs on her own to start the shows. Anyway, she had to deal with a heckler in Reda Wiedenbrück, and it was really unpleasant. I remember finally, I think after the first tune we did together, I sort of leaned over and I said, "Is everything okay?" And she said, "There's a man yelling things from the second row or whatever." And yeah, he was an idiot. That's right, Detlef. So I looked over and I could spot him right away. He was the only person doing this, you know. And so then we did like one more, and then he was complaining that it was too loud. We did one more song, and then I saw him get up out of his seat and go to the back of the room. And apparently, and he was there with his wife, who enjoyed the show. Uh, Apparently, he spent the rest of the show in this little ante room. It was in a church space, so there's this little kind of, maybe it's like where they put families or something with noisy kids. He was a noisy kid, definitely. It was like an 80-year-old noisy kid. Anyway, yeah, I kind of thought maybe he was a little bit, I don't know. Anyway, it was unfortunate. It was the only really unfortunate thing that happened on the whole trip. A Wutbürger. Wut. I'm trying to remember what Wut means. If you know the term. I don't know the term, Keston. You may have to explain to me. Hi, Alex. Nice to see you. Nice to see you out there. Anyway, I'll just start off by apologizing for all the many weeks that have gone by since I have done anything like a real stream. And even this stream will be pretty informal because I'm really tired. But I had a really good show here in Michigan last night. As you can see, it's a little after 1 p.m. here in Michigan. And I've been up for a couple of hours. I guess I got up at 10 or something. And I'm sleeping right behind this divider here at my friend Jeb's house. So there's an organization here in Michigan that is called the Michigan Fingerstyle Guitar Society. And they founded their thing, I don't know, 20 years ago, maybe a little more than 20 years ago. And I was the very first concert that they presented. And I remember it was in like this multi-purpose room. It was very nice, the venue, but it probably seated 100 people or something. But it was more like a ballroom that I did the first show in back in the 1870s or whenever it was that first show was. And a lot of the same people who presented that show are still presenting shows here in the state of Michigan, mostly in and around the Detroit area. So it always used to be just one gig, and now it's 2. So basically when you get invited, you come and you play the show I did last night, which was in a little place called Lake Orion. It was actually where I'm staying. I'm in Lake Orion right now. It looks like Lake Orion, but it's Michigan, so they pronounce it Orion, Lake Orion. And tonight's show is in Livonia, which is a suburb of Detroit. And it's a bit of chaos in Detroit because they have the NFL draft going on right now. So for those of you outside of the United States, which is most of you, the NFL is the National Football League here. And Americans are crazy about American football. They live and die by American football. We have a version of the same sport in Canada. It's actually the original. Like the Canadian Football League is older than the National Football League, and the Grey Cup is an older trophy than the Super Bowl or the AFC Championship and NFC Championship before them. But I haven't followed football since I was about 7, to be honest. And but here in the States, football is kind of a religion. And it's not just the professional level, the NFL, but also college football, where they play at colleges and universities. It's a big deal here. You get a football game at a big college here, and 100,000 people go. to watch teenagers and people in their early 20s play American football. It's real. So the draft meetings, which is when the teams all get together and decide which of the college teams players they're going to sign for a professional contract. They're happening in downtown Detroit right now, only a few miles from where I am. So people were saying, when you come to Michigan, don't take the Detroit crossing. Take the one through Sarnia, Ontario. It'll be much quieter. And it was fine. But that's how crazy it is. It's a meeting. I mean, these are people are just meeting and people are signing pieces of paper. And it's all over television. There are 200,000 people outside the convention center where they're having this thing, watching it on closed circuit TV and cheering. And it's a meeting. This is a big deal. So Detroit is directly on the Canadian border. And I swear that few meters of water that you cross from Canada into the United States, everything changes. The culture completely changes. They speak English on both sides of the bridge with a different accent, and the whole culture changes. It's really wild. So that's where I am right now. And it's very picturesque. I'm by a lake in the forest. It's very beautiful here. So let's see what people are saying. I don't know the term. Okay, angry citizen. Oh yeah, a Wutbürger. Okay, cool. Now I know a new word in German. Lake Orion. So cool. My friend from Norway grew up there? That's crazy, Kerstin. What a weird coinkydink. It's a small town. Weird. Quite a delightful little town. And the venue I played last night was really nice. It's called 20 Front Street. And so I think it used to be a garage, where they fix cars. Looking at the old picture of what it looked like from the outside before. It was very decrepit, not very nice looking. It had a great big garage door in front. But I guess the people who run it now took it over when it was in that condition, started presenting shows even when it was pretty rough looking. And over the course of the years, they've only been open since 2016 or something. And the place is beautiful now. You walk in, you would never know it was ever a garage. And they decorated it really nicely inside. They bought a bunch of old church pews and set them up as the seating. It only seats maybe 100 people, but really sweet place to play. And they charge a healthy ticket price. So I made decent money last night, and people bought a lot of records, which was really nice. So I'm on my last night of the tour that has started. It started for me in the middle of February. This is the last night tonight, my show in Detroit. So it's been one ride, that's for sure. I mean, it's been great. It's actually been 99% solid, wonderful experience. There's always a few bumps here and there, but no, this one was really good. So I have to add it up. 17 plus 20 plus 11, 12, 32, 35. I think tonight is show number 34 or 35 or maybe 33. I've lost track. Since the middle of February. So that's a lot of shows. I mean, some people do that many shows in a year. And I've done them in 2.5 months. So the way it started was I left Canada in the middle of February and started a German trip that involved a total of 2 solo shows and 15 shows with Jule Milischka, whom you've met. If you've been a member here for a while, you've met her a couple of times. I interviewed her a little over a year ago from her place in Dresden. We did a chat where I was in Canada and she was in Germany. And then when she was in Canada last summer and I was mixing her album, she did a live stream with me, and we talked about arranging for 2 guitars, which we do a lot of together, which is great. And so you've met her a couple of times. So she booked on her own a pretty massive tour in Germany, and I also picked up a couple of solo shows that my agent, who usually books me over there, he booked for me as well. And then so I did 15 of the 17 shows with Jule and 2 on my own. And then I went to Spain and did 3 shows with Pipo Romero, whom you haven't met yet. His English is still a bit halting, so maybe I'll wait until he gets really good at English and we'll have him as a guest. He's wonderful, great musician. And then I went back to Germany to go to a concert and fly home. And then I was only home for 3 days or something. And then I immediately ran to Canada and to another part of Canada. I was in Canada. I went to Ontario, and I can't remember if it was 11 or 12 shows with Kent Nishimura, a great young Japanese guitar phenomenon, huge YouTube presence. And we did a bunch of shows in Ontario and one in Montreal. And then he went home, and then I came here to Michigan to finish things off. So, reading more of these comments. It'll be nice to get home, yeah, for sure. You can say that again, Stealth Parrot. Alex says, how were your shows with Kent? I really dig his fingerstyle arrangements. Yeah, Kent is a very, very musically adept young player. So he's not just a really good tape recorder, because let's face it, when you're a cover artist, you're basically a tape recorder. He's not just really good at that part of it, but he also has a really very deep musical understanding. We can talk about very, very big musical concepts together. And even though his English is still at a rudimentary level, we can talk harmony language and nerd out that way. And it's really fun because he's very, very into it. Even to the point where at one point, like he really loves Keith Jarrett, who's my music hero. Piano player, and we were listening to some sections of a live album that Keith did at Carnegie Hall. I think it was recorded in 2006. And it's a great album. There's too much applause on it, but other than that, it's a great album. The music on it is amazing. And they're mostly improvisations, but then he also does a couple of jazz standards. And one of the beautiful tunes he does is called Time on My Hands, which was written back in the 1930s. I forgot the name of the person who wrote it, unfortunately. Anyway, Time on My Hands is the song. And he does this really beautiful arrangement. And we were trying to figure out what the second chord that he plays is. And we figured, okay, it's the chord based on the minor third, but it sounds like a diminished chord, but it also sounds like a tritone substitution going to the two chord. We're having this kind of conversation, and we were trying to figure out exactly which pitches he was playing in the chord. And we got to where we were staying that night, and I made a bit of food for the guys, him and his manager and me, and and then he couldn't rest. He was sitting there like struggling to eat his ravioli, and said, wait a second. And he went and got his guitar, and he kept trying different chord voicings. And I said, yeah, it's more tritony than that, though. Oh yeah, more Bill Evans than that. Oh yeah, oh, there it is. And we found it, and we were so excited. And that's what turns you on when you're a total music nerd, which he is. So all that to say that he's not just doing these things like a robot. He actually really hears the music well, and he can translate it into voicings and arrangements on the guitar with incredible dexterity. And if I played something once or twice at a show, he very often would be practicing, and he'd be playing it. He could hear it and play it. So he's a great musician. He still doesn't know how to read music, which he wants to learn, which is a good idea. He knows theory and harmony quite well. He's a very, very adept player. He's been playing since he was 5 years old, and he's 21 now. And he's been playing professionally since he was 12, which is absurd. But I'm one of those people who believes nobody should be a professional before they're an adult, but that's just me. In fact, his manager wanted to, his manager is an old friend of mine. His manager was instrumental, pardon the pun, in bringing me to Japan the first time I went in around the year 2000. And so, he's a nice guy, and we get along great. Anyway, a few years ago, he told me about Kent, and he wanted me to bring him over for a tour as early as 2018. And that's how many years ago? 6 years ago? So Kent only would have been 15. And I just said, look, I'm not going to tour with children. I just don't do that. So give me a call when he's over 18, and we'll think about it. And so he turned 18 during the pandemic. So finally, during the pandemic, we said, okay, well, once this thing settles down, we'll pick a part of Canada, because Canada's too big. We'll pick a region, and we'll just go there, and I'll book a bunch of shows for us. And that's exactly what I did. So he's a great musician. We had a lot of talks about original music. This is a contentious topic, and I understand not everybody agrees with me, but I'm one of those people who I'm always wanting to hear new music. I like music from all time, and I like almost every style of music you can think of. Even like commercial country music, every once in a while there's a song I go, that's a good song. Might have too much pedal steel in it, but it's a good song. I can hear a good song, even if it's sung by some guy putting on an accent, wears a big hat. But anyway, it's fine. And even like really angular jazz, sometimes I listen to it and go, whoa, there's really cool things going on there musically. So I'm very open-minded about music, but I'm not a big fan of somebody getting up and just playing cover tunes on the guitar. It's not really my thing. I've never really liked it. So I was a little, admittedly, reluctant to have Kent on the road with me. First, because he was so young. Second, because he didn't play any original music. And it's still something I struggle with in the aftermath of the tour. It's just like, sometimes, I'm one of those people who overall doesn't really care what people think about him, sorry. But at the same time, I thought, are people thinking I'm being opportunistic, having this guy with a huge YouTube following on tour with me? That was something that did concern me. And of course, his YouTube following is so big because he plays Steely Dan tunes and Doobie Brothers tunes and Careless Whisper and all these things, right? And because that stuff always goes over well on YouTube. It's an easy way to build a following. It just is. That's why I've always done it the hard way, and I have so few subscribers as a result. But I don't care. So he's got a big following, and then I thought, people are gonna wonder about the cover thing, but in the end, yeah, I just adopted I don't really care what people think, and I saw the virtue in what he did. He's a very, what Aristotle would call a very virtuous musician. He's a very good musician. He's really good at what he does. So that's a very long answer to your question, but I figured I would just be frank about the whole thing. Kent and I talked about the importance of original music and how in the music community you get taken much more seriously if you compose as well as arrange. So he told me that he suffers from a lot of self-editing, which most people do. Most people always think that their ideas sound stupid until they play them a million times to themselves and they get used to their own ideas and they say, oh, this isn't so bad. I've suffered from that my entire life, but I've put out 18 albums, mostly original music. So I'm a big believer in being creative rather than just being an arranger. But yeah, he's a great musician. Yeah, he was incredible live, you say. Oh, no, it's stealthy say that. Yeah, great. And polite. Yeah, he's a very, very sweet young man. He's, Japanese people are polite to a fault almost. It's part of the culture. But he's a really, really nice young man. I really enjoyed getting to know him. We got along great. You need Kent in Europe, yeah. Hi, George. Nice to see you. And Kestine, that's a music nerdy conversation for sure. I like the last Skrillex album. I don't know if I've heard the last one. I think I heard a couple of albums ago. I heard a long interview with Skrillex on the radio in Toronto when I was on the road, and I like a lot of what he does. I think it's great. Yeah, I love electronic music, and you'd be surprised what I listen to at home and in the car. Almost no guitar music. Yeah, I'm sure it's really good. No, it's not a stupid joke. Kestine, you appreciate you sharing this with us. I totally get your point about covers, and I also prefer original music, but Kent's covers are just great. And of course, I'd love to see him live. Absolutely. Yeah, he does an amazing job. And also, I like his choice of material that he chose to play live on this tour. Like, he did really cool tunes like Pretzel Logic by Steely Dan. It's really their coolest tune. It's like a minor blues, and it's such a great song, and it's got the chorus is so beautiful in it, and he did a great job getting all the chords in there. He and I, for fun, we did a couple of times, we did What a Fool Believes by Doobie Brothers, which is a really cool song. But then eventually he said, no, I just want to do your songs with you, and that was cool. So we did, we switched the encores to Tight Trite Night and Dracula and Friends Part 1. We even kind of worked out for Dracula and Friends a bit of choreography where we did all the same guitar slaps. It was really fun. The audience went nuts. And then he did like Synchronicity 2 by the Police, which is my favorite Police song. And he did a surprisingly beautiful arrangement of Alfie, which is a Burt Bacharach song that he wrote for a movie back in the 60s. And the original recording I don't really like. I think it was Lulu who did it. And it's like, what's it all about, Alfie? It's a bit cornball. But then when he played it and he brought in all these beautiful passing chord changes that he came up with himself, his own arrangement of the tune is stunningly beautiful, actually. It really makes you realize, wow, it is a gorgeous piece of music, isn't it? So, yeah, I mean, he really brings a lot of musicality to it. So, absolutely. He's using Natasha guitars. That's right. No, they're not Japanese. They're made in China. It's actually shocking how good Chinese guitars are getting. I mean, it's like everything else, right? China is the world's factory, and what often happens is it's not necessarily, in the case of guitars, it's not necessarily any great breaches of intellectual property stealing going on, but they're just like taking the best of Western guitar kind of approach and then turning it into a factory guitar that is really high quality. So in the case of his guitar, yeah, it's really beautiful. The wood choices are gorgeous. It's made a certain way for him, like with a double top in places, because he does a lot of guitar percussion, and it can absorb. So it's a custom instrument for him. But yeah, made in China. And there's another company based in Germany called Duke Guitars, and Duke they have several brands, from quite cheap ones like Cole Clark. No, Cole Clark is one of the more expensive ones. Anyway, they work with people like Alexander Misko, who has a Baton Rouge, weird looking Baton Rouge fan fret guitar. That's one of their brands. But they also have Ramirez, which is a very respected classical brand, and they have a couple of other ones. And Eula works with them as well. They're making a custom crossover nylon string for her, and they've also got a steel string which she has at the house, which sounds quite good for a factory guitar made in China. They're shocking, and of course they sell for like 2,000 euros, as opposed to going to a luthier and getting one made for €1 billion. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the theme of this little thing. I was just going to talk a bit about what it's been like to tour now that COVID is kind of, sort of, not really, but almost done. We're acting as if it's done for the most part. I was extremely careful during the worst of COVID. I always wore a mask if I had to go anywhere. I had to isolate at the beginning of it because I was coming back from the States when things were already bad, and I had to cancel a tour. And so I had to isolate from Brooke on a different floor of the house. And then later on, I eventually, when I finally, like 2.5 years after COVID started, I finally took a gig outside of Prince Edward Island, or outside of the Maritimes, and I played the Saskatchewan Jazz Festival, and I came back with COVID and was really sick. That was the summer of 22, sick for 4 days anyway. And then I caught COVID one other time, just this past December, when I went to Toronto to do my annual show that I used to do, that I started doing again at Hughes Room, and came back with COVID then. So I've had it twice. Brooks had it twice, I think. Anyway, so it's like, fortunately, the last time I had it, it wasn't much. It was just like a sniffle, a couple of coughs, but I tested positive. And so, like, I was really careful, and then eventually I just said, like everybody else, I realized, okay, I've had it a couple of times. I've had 1 million shots against it. I'm probably going to be okay, right? So I've been acting as if everything's okay. I don't wear a mask even on the airplane. I just don't do it anymore. On the airplane, it's probably a good idea. In the airport, it's probably a good idea, but I just don't anymore because I'm lazy. And I'm fine. Nothing bad happened on the trip. But I thought I would talk a little bit about how this whole thing got together. So, yeah, I started speaking to Eula. Okay, so in Germany, you got to book a year out. That's how everybody works it, right? So I only really got to know Eula early last year. Like, we'd been talking a little bit about collaborating for almost a year before that, but we finally got to be buddies early in 2023. So she said, okay, well, let's do a tour. I'll start booking it now. I'll get you to play at my festival. She has a festival in a town called Gingen. That's in early March. So, okay, great. Well, so that'll be the anchor, and then we'll book around a bunch of stuff around it. So, between her and my regular agent, we booked a tour that started in on or around February 20th, I think it was. So, what I'm going to do is just for fun, bring up this little graphic that I did. It's using an online app. It's called what's it called? Traveler's Point. Okay, and you can see there's like this big gaping elliptical hole with my itinerary in the middle of all those big airplane flights. So, and along the left side of the screen, you should be able to see. Let me just double check YouTube, make sure this is working properly. Yes. Along the left side of the screen, you can see where I started and where I went and where I ended up. But you can see on the map that where I live, I think you can see my cursor, is right here in Charlottetown, right? So the far east of Canada. But you can't really fly directly from Charlottetown to anywhere except Montreal, Toronto, and Ottawa. So I flew from Charlottetown to Toronto. As you can see on the left side, that's where the tour started. And then I flew from Toronto to Frankfurt in Germany, direct, and then picked up a little flight from Frankfurt to Dresden to meet up with Eula, and we started rehearsing, and we started our driving from there. And then the rest of the German trip was done by car. So you can see there after Dresden here, I played in a town called Meurs, which is in the northwest of the country. Let me see if I can blow this up. I've never used this app before, so this is new to you as it is to me. All right. So yeah. So here's Dresden, where I flew into, right? And then the first gig, unfortunately, was all the way back west in Meurs, which I'm not going to find here. Hold on. There it is. Okay. Bit of a trek, but the easiest thing was to get over to Eula's and get some rehearsal going on. So you can see where Meurs is. And then the next gig, unfortunately, this is how it turned into a bit of a Star of David kind of tour, only because my agent had booked the Meurs gig, and it only happens on Wednesdays. So we had to book the Wednesday that I was going to be around. We went from there all the way up back to, oh no, that's right, it was in Frundenberg, so not so bad. And then Reda Wiedenbrück, we played in a church space there. So you can see the beginning of the tour kind of sort of made sense. And then back to Rheinberg, which is very close to where I started the tour. Okay. And then Wemmelskirchen. Let's see, that's not so bad. So most of this is like in the Ruhrgebiet area in the northwest of Germany, the most heavily populated part of the country. There's lots of gigs, lots of people, right? Then we went Bühl, so boink, that's south, okay? Way down south, but in Baden-Württemberg, okay? Which is the part of Germany that actually Eula is originally from, in the southwestern part of Germany. Then we played her festival, which is in Gingen. So, see, not too bad getting from Bühl to Gingen. And then from Gingen, we were there for several days for the festival. And then we zipped over to Tübingen, and that's where Duke Guitars is based. And so she was there doing some negotiation with them about her signature models that they're designing. So there's going to be a Eula Melischka guitar that they make. It'll be a crossover nylon string guitar. And then also we did a show there while we were there, and a workshop. And Tübingen's really beautiful. And then we went from there to Hersbruck. So it was a bit of a trek. And we played a cinema there. A very beautiful place. It's kind of the last of the series that they're doing at this this venue. It's called Kino Kick or something like that. Sorry, I keep losing this map. Okay. Then we went from Hersbruck to Bamberg, so not far. And that was another very sweet little gig that a friend of hers puts on. It's part of the Bamberg Gitarrentage series. Lovely. And then we went to Weisenheim, and I've played in Weisenheim a few times before. And it's in a wine growing region there in the south of Germany. Very nice. And then we went to a beer brewing area. Went to Maisach and played the beer and guitar series, which is very folky, very folksy. It's you play in this basically in a brew pub kind of room with the long tables like they do in Bavaria, and it's kind of a dumb little gig, but anyway, it paid money. That's why we did it. But then this is where it got crazy. We went all the way back to Neunkirchen, which, as you can see, is on the other side of Germany practically. It's right on the French border. In fact, my friends from France came to the show. Then I was already booked to do this thing called the European Guitar Award in Dresden, which is back there again, where Yuda lives. And she didn't even go. She had her own solo gig in another town further north, up near Berlin. So we had quite a trek. We drove most of the way together. She picked up a rental car, went up to Berlin. I continued to Dresden. I stayed in her guest flat and did the European Guitar Award. I performed and I also adjudicated. And I'll tell you, the players who played at this thing were amazing. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And then we went from there. The last gig we did together on the tour was in Gerbstedt after the gig in Dresden. So I met up with her there in Gerbstedt, and we returned her car, I guess, the next day or something. Yeah, that's right. That's how it worked. Then I went back to Dresden, and then I flew from Dresden to, I remember my plane got canceled because this is one of the few bad things that happened. My trip from Dresden to Frankfurt got canceled, and we figured it was because Lufthansa had a series of rotating strikes going on. So they were randomly canceling flights, usually at the last minute. So I left Eula's area to get to the airport about an hour and a half before my flight was supposed to leave, and I didn't get a notification that it was canceled until I got there. So I got to the airport, so I was not pleased. So I had to fly the next day to Munich, and then arrive, fortunately, still in time to do my show way down in Barcelona. So there's Barcelona there. Okay, so I went all the way from Northern Europe to Southern Europe, just like that, but not even all the way south. And Barcelona is in the northeastern part of Spain, in Catalonia, where they speak a different language, right? They don't speak Castilian Spanish, they speak Catalonian or Catalunian, whatever you call it. Catalan, that's what it's called. So it's kind of somewhere between French and Spanish. Really cool sounding language, very interesting to read, especially if you speak French, because you see all the words that are French that are not Spanish in the language. So that's kind of neat. So there's Barcelona. Okay, let's get back there. And I met up with Pipo Romero there and did Barcelona. Then after Barcelona, which was lovely and a beautiful venue, we played in Madrid, of course, the capital of Spain. And that was a cool gig. We played in what's called a flamenco cave, a very small venue, maybe 30 people, but it's where Paco de Lucia used to play all the time. So that felt very historic. Even though it wasn't a big money gig, it was so interesting to do, and Madrid's a beautiful city. And then we went from there to all the way down to where Pipo is from, way down here in the far south of Spain, in Cadiz. So Cadiz is, it's near Seville. It's like in flamenco country, right? And that's where Pipo is from. But of course, Pipo's music is very, very infused with flamenco sounds, but he plays steel string guitar, which is very unusual. And for that reason, actually, a lot of people don't know what to make of him in Spain. It's really neat because he's a great player, writes the most exquisite music, and he plays the Lincoln Center in New York. He plays the Kennedy Center in Washington. And in Spain, it's like he can barely get people to take him seriously, except in his hometown. We played in Cadiz, and it was a great crowd and a beautiful theater, and we had a great time. And it was a really nice way to do my last show on the European part of the trip. As you can see, you're not far from the Strait of Gibraltar, you're not far from Africa, and all that interesting stuff. Then from there, I went, Cadiz, I went up to Seville. I took the train to catch a plane back to Frankfurt, and then I ended up eventually in Stuttgart, where I met up with Yula again because our favorite musician, uh, he's basically the musician that both of us like the most. As a pair of friends, we love his music. Gregory Privat, great piano player. We actually did one of his tunes on Yula's album, a tune called "Song for Jojo," and so yeah, we played in Stuttgart. No, he played in Stuttgart. We went to the show. It was part of the jazz festival. It was a ton of fun. The show was so good, and the other half of the show was a Polish jazz bassist. Her name is Kinga Glick, and she was great. Not really my cup of tea stylistically. Like I didn't like the writing as much, but Gregory was amazing. And then I had to go back to Stuttgart to fly home, Dresden rather, to fly home because that's where my ticket was into. So I flew from Dresden to Frankfurt to Toronto to Charlottetown. Crazy, what? And then I was only in at Charlottetown for about 3 days, and then I ended up. You can see all this chaos here. A lot of backing and forthing between Charlottetown and Toronto. Then I met up with Kent at the Toronto airport. They arrived a day late because their flight from Washington to Toronto got delayed because of weather. So they arrived a day late after having to spend a night in the Washington airport sitting on hard benches because they couldn't use a hotel because they were in the transit zone because they're Japanese nationals and they were on their way to Canada. They were only connecting through the States, so they weren't allowed to leave the airport. They weren't allowed to leave one section of the airport. It was terrible. Poor them. But we ended up meeting up and we went up to Sudbury. Okay, so you can see how far north that is. If you remember my song Any Color But Blue, it's about trying to get to a gig in Sudbury. So we did the same drive, but in April this time. So not so bad. It was just raining, I think. So we went from Toronto up to Sudbury, and then we went all the way over to Sault Ste. Marie, which is really far from everything. It's in what they call the near north of Ontario. So there's a lot of Ontario that's further north, but hardly anybody lives up there. Sault Ste. Marie is kind of the last significant town that you hit before, when you're going west, you'll eventually hit Thunder Bay over here, and eventually you'll get to Winnipeg, which is way over there. That's several days' journey. So anyway, we did all this humongous amount. I did all the driving in Canada. Yuda and I split it in Germany, and I took trains in Spain. So this was a lot of driving. But it was nice to get back to Sault Ste. Marie. It had been a long time since I played there. And the crowd went nuts, and they went nuts in Sudbury too. And then we went and stayed in Bracebridge just to have a day off in a nice place to recoup a little bit. It was still a lot of driving. And then Kent had a solo show down here in Kitchener in the south of Ontario. And then from there we went to London, which isn't far from Kitchener, London, Ontario. Great show there. You may have seen a picture on Facebook of the crowd cheering behind us the other day. And then we played in Toronto at Hughes Room, my place I've played a million times. And then we went all the way over to Montreal here, and we played a place called La Sala Rosa, which was a lot of fun. Small venue. Let's see, sorry, I screwed that up. And then we went from Montreal to where did we go next? Peterborough, Ontario, so north and east of Toronto. And then we played in Brighton, which is very close to Peterborough, so that was a little bit of fortunate booking in terms of itinerary. But then we had to double back and go to Ottawa, which is most of the way back to Montreal. Played a small show there. And then we did a really wonderful show in Port Perry, Ontario. Again, very close to where I used to live in Ontario, northeast of Toronto, about an hour and a quarter. And then we went up to Haliburton, which is really beautiful. It looks like Scotland up there. It's very, very sweet. And we did a great show up there at a place called the Music Room. And then I took those guys back to Toronto. And they flew home. And now I'm in Lake Orion, which is here. And then tonight I'm playing here in Livonia, which is basically part of Detroit. And then I will go home. So that's my trip. Isn't that nuts? It's nuts. It's a lot of travel. And let's see, I go back to camera. Here we go. It's a lot of travel. And yeah, it's a little unusual. I've done a month at a time before. And I've even done like a month and then maybe a short break and then a week or two, but never, like basically 6 weeks almost without a break. It was just the 3 days back on PEI between Europe and the States, and that's been it. So, so anyway, in terms of touring, things are kind of back to normalish, and the venues that survived COVID, some of them survived really well, and now are getting good crowds out again. It was nice to see people patronizing certain, like, Eula's Festival, the night that we played. The Friday is always the big night. She does a Saturday as well, but she had 300 people come on the Friday, which is great. And they were very appreciative and very supportive of what she's doing. It's nice to see. And yeah, some of the shows like London and Toronto, and they were just great shows. And a lot of the ones in Germany felt really good too. Cadiz was a lot of fun in Spain. So it's feeling really hopeful. It feels like we're back, getting back to normal. I felt very good about being able finally to have a chance to really showcase the new album. And last night I did a solo show. It was the first solo show I did since partway through the German tour. And it was really interesting to do a whole program of my own stuff and really delve deep into the catalog as well as play a lot of new music. So, and people really dug it. So I'm feeling really good about it. During COVID, I thought maybe my touring days were over. I thought that several times. I thought, well, between, being in my early 60s now and, things being so kooky-booky on the road, and maybe it's just not going to happen. But now that it's back open, I'm really enjoying playing live music, because for me, music is the most visceral. It's the most meaningful when it's just coming directly out of instruments right into your ears, and there's no intermediary step. There's no recording involved. There's no synthesis involved. It's just you and me, right? Kind of thing. Even a couple of the shows I did without amplification. I mean, direct into people's ear holes, no mics, no pickups. So it's pretty sweet. I really did miss doing it. And the actual playing, I love so much. The travel is exhausting. And I've done probably, when you count the airplane flights, likely 40 or 50,000 kilometers in the last 6 weeks. So yeah, being in one place for a little while might be nice. All right, I see a few questions, a few comments. George asks, I've always been curious about my preparation for live shows, and I was wondering if I wouldn't mind sharing some insights with me. Do you typically rehearse on the guitar before every show? Great question. Some people do that. Some people feel like they really have to warm up a lot before they go on, and I get it. I think that there's a wisdom to it, especially if you haven't played in a couple of weeks, or if it's been a month since your last show. Just going out and playing cold is probably not a good idea for a couple of reasons. There's the physical aspect of your hands not really getting back into moving that way, and then you're doing it kind of full on live. That's a bit much to ask of your body. There's also the recall, like making sure that the tunes that you're not 100% sure about, that you go over them a little bit. So yesterday, yeah, I don't normally do much preparation, but yesterday I had some special requests from fans for certain tunes. So I thought, okay, I have to woodshed a few things. Plus, there's a couple of tunes on the new record that when I was doing collaborative shows, I wasn't playing live. I was featuring other tunes. But there's nothing wrong with the tunes I wasn't playing. And I thought, well, I want to play those ones as well, now that I've got the time, because I'm doing a whole program by myself. So I spent a fair bit of time sitting on this sofa yesterday in my friend's house, going over this one tune called Obrigado Egberto, which I never play, mostly because I don't like playing it solo. I think it sounds really good either with a second guitar or the band backing it up. But I worked out a version of it that I thought, no, I can live with this. This is okay as a solo version. But I really had to think about it because I hadn't played it in a while. And I wrote it 30 years ago. So it's a 30-year-old tune that I've only played live a handful of times in my life. And then a tune like As Eddie Leaves the Building off the new record. It's the first tune I wrote for the album, and it's the one that I've played the least off it. I mean, there's certain tunes that are just album cuts that I'll never play live, like the tune with the orchestra and stuff like that. But As Eddie Leaves the Building is a good tune. I really like it. And but I hadn't played it in so long that I had to really, again, woodshed it. And at times I was like, what does it do next? And oh, yeah, right. Muscle memory would kick in. Um, I've known players who obsessively warm up for like half an hour before a show. I've never been like that. In my history, I've done so many concerts over the years that I tend to be kind of warm most of the time. My hands are kind of ready to play almost all the time. And even during COVID, I was playing a lot because I was composing a lot and doing live streaming shows and stuff like that. So I personally don't prepare like some people do. As far as rehearsing, I kind of feel like I did so much rehearsal and practice for decades, leading up to being a full time player, that I don't feel like I have to rehearse as much. Most of my repertoire I can recall. Again, this whole memory thing. That's maybe, my old joke was, I've told this before, but people often would ask me when all my kids were young, how do you remember so many hours of repertoire and so many different tunings? And my joke response was always a mortgage and 3 children. Your livelihood depends on something that you need to remember, then usually you can remember it. Kerstin, you still haven't had COVID. You lucky dog. Well, you're obviously doing something right. Although I've seen you in public with no mask on, so you're taking risks too. But good on you. And same with you, Steve. Okay, so what did Kent think of Canada? I think he thought it was really fascinating. He made a lot of comments as we were doing all this driving, right? And I was doing all the driving because they drive on the other side of the road in Japan. I don't think either of them has a driver's license. So I said it's okay. I charged them a little commission for it because it's a lot of driving. It seemed only fair. But yeah, we probably did about 8,000 kilometers on the road. So I was in the driver's seat. Kent's manager, Pusan, was in the passenger seat. And Kent was behind his manager in one of the passenger seats behind us. And every once in a while he would say, wow, he says, looking out the window, it's incredible because I keep asking myself if this is real. And I said, why, you just can't believe you're in another country? He says, no. It's like, in Japan, it's almost impossible to see anything that looks like this, except maybe if you go up to Hokkaido, the most northerly island, and you go out into the countryside, you might see areas that look like this. He says, but all these lakes, all these trees, all these rocks, all these gorgeous places, the animals that you see running around, he says it's just not like that at all in Japan. So I think he was really fascinated by the fact that there's so much space, especially in Northern Ontario. You can drive for a long time sometimes and hardly see anybody else. And Japan is so crowded. It's 200 million people, mostly living on the island of Honshu. So it's cities like Tokyo is the biggest city in the world, right? Over 30 million people. He lives in Osaka, which is smaller, but probably still 5 million people. It's probably still a big place. And I've visited Japan on many occasions, and yeah, he's right. I mean, there's just people and buildings everywhere. Even in a small town, everything's built up, right? So to see a place that was kind of wild and untamed to a certain extent, I think he found that very interesting and refreshing. And I often would book us places to stay where there was like a lake and trees, and you could go for a walk, and they were just like, this is amazing. So yeah, I think that he was quite impressed. Alex, if I want to bring you to Sweden, what's the best way to start? How to find a venue that would be interested in acoustic guitar music? Do you have any? I've played in Sweden a few times, Alex. Mostly hosted by Jimmy Wallstein, really great guitar player based in Stockholm. Now Jimmy these days, I think, he shifted away from the solo guitar thing, and he's back to doing a lot of music direction for television shows and for bands. That's what he was doing before. He tried going it solo for a while. Last I heard, he wasn't doing very many solo shows at all. But he may be interested in doing a show together if I came back to Sweden. I haven't been to Sweden in probably 12 years. So I'm due. And the places I've played in Stockholm several times, and I've played in Uppsala at the Guitar Festival. I've tried to get myself booked again at Uppsala, and the artistic director keeps saying, "Yeah, we'll do it one day," but it hasn't gotten around to it yet. Um, so it's the same artistic director as was there the year I played it, which was I think 2010. Um, so I think his name is Pontvik. Klaus Pontvik is his name. See, why do I remember that? I remember Klaus Pontvik. Um, so uh, there, I'm sure there are venues that are worth exploring, but maybe the best thing to do is I could put you directly in touch with Jimmy, and he could maybe give you some ideas and maybe even be interested in doing a show or two together. Okay, so let's talk about that. Um, yes, Don, I'm sure we all agree with you that we enjoy live music. Yeah, I mean, what's not to love about live music? It's so exciting. You know, the only concert I've been to as an audience member recently was that one in Stuttgart where Gregory played, and he and his band were just so great. It was electrifying. It was one, and I know the album quite well that he was showcasing, so it was really fun to hear those tunes come alive. Yeah, Canada is gorgeous. When were you here, Kerstin? Yeah, I'd like to know. You've never been to Stockholm. You'll come if I play there. Okay, I know you go up to Norway quite often, so it'd be about the same as doing that. Okay, yeah, but Alex, let's talk offline and we'll work on it. Cause yeah, Eula and I have all kinds of plans now to do a whole lot of touring, both on both sides of the border, both sides of the water. So I could easily zip up to Sweden either on my own or with her or play with Jimmy or whatever. Uh, yeah, I'm going to be spending a lot more time in Europe the next little while. Groovy. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Let me know. But I think we're good for this week. If I just thought I would share some of the experiences. Partly because it was almost novel for me too to do this much touring again. I don't think that I would always be planning to do 2.5 months straight and over 30 shows like this. It's just the way things fell together. You know, Yuda wanted to do the tour in Germany around her festival, and then um, Kent wanted to come, and I thought, well, April is a safe bet in Canada, especially because Easter fell early this year, so the whole month of April was kind of available, and without holidays in the middle of it. Excuse me. So so yeah, what I told him is like, let's just pick a region of Canada, and Ontario is rich with gigs. So and I used to live there, so I know the scene pretty well there. But you know, we could have done British Columbia or the middle of the country, but Eula and I are doing British Columbia later in the year, so I didn't want to go twice in the same year. So that all made sense. But yeah, it was just the way things worked out, and it was a little, probably a little too much time away, too much travel. But I've got a bit of free time now, so we'll get back to something approaching normal. Um, yeah, you're very welcome, Detlef. And of course, yeah, I'll come back to Germany soon. When am I coming back to Germany? What is this? I'll be there in July. I'm playing 5 shows, I think, in July with Yule. And then she's coming over to Canada in August. And we're paying the favor of doing some shows in Nova Scotia. So yeah, that's the plan. So July, the dates are already on my website. I think there's one gig that I still don't have information for, so that's not on there. But you can take a look. I don't even remember where they are. I don't think I've played any of the towns before. So anyway, check those out. DonRossOnline.com and go to the tour page. Okay, great. Um, yes, October. Yes. I'm back in October too. That's right. We're going up to Scotland, and then we're also doing German shows as well in October, and then we're doing North American shows in November, and then there's already stuff happening in the new year. Eula's already booking another tour for next March because her festival happens again. So I think I'll probably be back at the festival, and yeah, so all good. All right, thanks you guys. Next week for sure we can get back together, and if you have suggestions for what you'd like me to touch on, let's hear them. Okay? Just send me a note through the Facebook page or whatever. All right. Nice to see you guys again. Thanks for putting up with my absence all these weeks, except for that one quick live one from the car on the road. Okay. Be well, and we'll talk next week. Okay. Bye bye.